From Washington, the McLaughlin Group, the American original. For over 3 decades, the sharpest minds, best sources, hardest talk.
In today's global economy, finding smart investments requires expertise from the ground up, seeing first what others see eventually. At Franklin Templeton, we have experts across the globe with local insight to spot distant opportunities and navigate world markets. Our approach has given us a unique perspective on global investing for over 60 years. Franklin Templeton Investments. Gain from our perspective.
Issue 1, Romney roaming. In his first overseas tour since becoming the Republican Party nominee in April, Mitt Romney is visiting 3 countries: the UK, Israel, and Poland. Strong U.S. allies all. First stop the UK in London, Mr. Romney witnessed the opening of the Summer Olympic Games. Romney oversaw the Winter Games in 2002 in Salt Lake City, Utah, as president and CEO of the Salt Lake Organizing Committee. So, he was asked on Wednesday whether the Olympics in London look, quote-unquote, ready to him.
There are a few things that were disconcerting. The stories about the private security firm not having enough people, the supposed strike of the immigration and customs officials, that obviously is not something which is encouraging.
He also met with top British officials, including UK Prime Minister David Cameron, at 10 Downing Street, talking Middle East peace, among other topics. But the subject of the Olympics seemed to prickle the Prime Minister, who made this statement in a press conference prior to meeting with Mr. Romney.
We are holding an Olympic Games in one of the busiest, most active, bustling cities anywhere in the world. I mean, of course, it's easier if you hold an Olympic Games in the middle of nowhere.
Mr. Romney, after meeting with Cameron, applauded the London Organizing Committee. Question, is this trip helping to define the direction of Mitt Romney's foreign policy when and if he becomes president? Pat Buchanan.
Yes, it is, John, but that crack about Salt Lake City being the middle of nowhere was almost a religious slur, I think.
You mean by
I thought we almost had an Anglo-Mormon war going on here. But listen, what Mitt Romney is doing is he's picked 3 very pro-American countries, Great Britain, Poland, and Israel. And part of his thesis is that Obama has neglected them or treated them shabbily in trying to deal with America's enemies rather than America's friends, and he's going to be a strong ally of America's friends. But he's got a real problem here, John. I think this trip is a tremendous risk for him. Let's take the Israeli part of it. He's going to get the benediction of Bibi Netanyahu, his old buddy maybe, but it could cost him. There are going to be people pushing him to say when he would strike Iran, would he back up an Israeli strike, what will you do in Syria? And he wants to maintain his flexibility and freedom of action. You'll recall, John, his father did not in 1967 on foreign policy and got himself into horrible trouble.
Romney and Bibi Netanyahu were both giving counsel to Bain, correct?
No, they were with Boston Consulting Group before Bain.
Before Bain.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they're business buddies from way back. I think Romney went over there trying to assert that he has a special relationship with Britain and that he somehow would do better getting along with our traditional allies. And he did not get off to a very good start. He managed to insult the Brits by suggesting they can't handle the Olympics and they may not come together. In fairness, he was probably speaking as a mechanic who oversaw the logistics and the security of a previous Olympics. But the British press has been unmerciful towards him, calling him the nowhere man, comparing him to Sarah Palin, wondering if they're in for another gaffe-prone president like George Bush. I mean, he's got to be glad to get back to the gentle U.S. press. So the trip is turning out to be exactly the opposite of what he wanted. He wanted to bask in the glow of the Olympics. He's skipping the one event where his wife's horse is performing because that's too associative with rich people spending money on horses. I think that the trip is backfiring.
Are the newspapers that are so editorializing against him left-wing to start with?
No.
They are not?
No, they're across the spectrum. He insulted the country. Olympics is a moment of extreme national pride, and for a foreign challenger to come in and say the things he did, however well-meaning they were meant, is a disaster.
That using the word insult to describe what Romney did is an excess of anger or disapproval rather than it is a true estimate?
I think they felt insulted. I mean, I read the British media, and I think they did feel insulted.
How much media did you read?
I read something from the Telegraph. I read stuff from the Guardian. I read all the British journalists were using on Twitter using the hashtag. They were having fun with making fun of how I thought Romney looked bad, and in that regard, I would like to go back and look at how they reacted to Obama's various
Do you think that typically a Brit has an excess of propriety to start with that's purely known to Britain, and everyone's very polite to each other? And we don't talk that way in the United States, do we? I'm going to hear the end of this. Go ahead.
I think that Londoners, just like New Yorkers, are able to be fairly saucy and rude in my own experience, and I don't mean that as an insult. I'm a New Yorker too. Yes, and it was one of the least friendly, welcoming cities I've ever been to. Was London.
We're all saucy.
Yes, and I think though Romney coming across, stepping in and criticizing them, it's like somebody shows up and criticizes your brothers or the way your family runs. You can make that criticism, but it looks bad when you do it. And Obama has made all these missteps with London and with England, and I think Pat's exactly right. Romney was trying to go and saying, I'm not going to offend England by doing stuff like sending the Winston Churchill bust out of the White House, like giving the Queen an iPod loaded with my speeches. All these missteps that Obama made, Romney was trying to contrast himself to that. He's failed.
Paul Glasser.
Well, I don't think you can look at it as anything but an insult felt. The conservative, austerity-minded prime minister with whom Romney was supposed to have sympathy stood up and felt insulted and criticized Romney right back. So it was a very, very bad
situation. Was that the
situation
end of the
Romney.
exchange on this matter between the two, or later on was it also reintroduced? And Romney tried to apologize for any offense he had given.
He came out in front of 10 Downing Street and tried to walk it back and tried to say fine things about the Olympics and express that his confidence that things would go well. But as everyone was saying, the cat was out of the bag. The press had a field day with it. And remember, this is his maiden voyage in foreign policy, and diplomacy is part of what a president does. And he blew the easiest. He missed the easiest fastball over the plate ever.
What's the net political damage when Americans see this and they think
very little? That's very little.
Don't they make allowance for the British way of speaking and their properness, etc.? You say they can be saucy, but they're really reductively a lot more proper.
If you actually ask yourself what was the purpose of the trip, it was not to please foreigners. It was to send messages to key constituents in the United States, including evangelicals who support Israel and patriotic people who hate Barack Obama.
So is there any possible gain from this as far as Romney is concerned?
There is a gain. Let me
What's the gain?
The gain is if he gets to Israel, and Bibi Netanyahu says basically this guy is really with us and he's a strong supporter of ours, because the Jewish community, which gave Obama a 57-point margin, is very skeptical of Obama now. This trip is about Broward County, Dade County, and Palm Beach County.
And the president
Jewish, largely Jewish.
And the president
there's a heavy Jewish concentration there, and it's a swing country.
I know, I live there.
And the president, the president countered signing a big aid package for Israel to counter any goodwill.
That's the name of the game.
That's right, exactly.
Okay, next stop, Israel. Israel is the country Mr. Romney says he'll visit first if elected president, in direct contrast to Barack Obama, who did not visit Israel in his first term, although, like Romney, he did so as candidate Obama in 2008. Romney meets with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who he has been friendly with since 1976, when both worked for the Boston Consulting Group as corporate advisors. Next week, Poland, meeting with Prime Minister Donald Tusk and later Polish icon Lech Wałęsa. Poland has agreed to accommodate part of a U.S. missile defense system, one that has raised Russian hackles. Last March, 4 months ago, during the GOP primary, Romney called Russia the U.S., quote-unquote, #1 geopolitical foe. Question, how do you rate Mitt Romney's overseas trip thus far? Eleanor Clift.
Well, it's been a failure so far, but he's only just begun. And now he is going to visit two of our strongest allies. And there are two governments where I would say President Obama's approval ratings are probably upside down. They're very Republican-leaning governments. And Romney has said that he's not going to take any questions, do any press conferences. He's going to count on the American people by inference to somehow think that he'd be, better with these constituents he's trying to woo. I think it's marginal, and I think any time Romney spends not talking about the economy is time wasted in terms of his presidential ambitions.
Do you think he has really taken a higher position on the stage simply by undertaking the mental rigor, the danger, if you will, of the trip?
The risk, John.
Not the physical danger.
No, it's the
political danger.
The political risk, frankly, should have been 0 in England and 0 in Poland. The risk is really in the Middle East. Look, Syria is exploding. There's talk of going in and attacking their chemical weapons. You've got Iran. At what point, when the negotiations fail, does Israel attack? Will America back them up? I think the idea of him going in there and saying nothing and listening and waiting till he gets home, but he's going to be pushed to say something.
Why? Well, I want to ask you a question.
Sure.
Since you're world travel. Why Poland?
Oh, Poland. I love Poland, and
thanks for that.
I will tell you why I love Poland.
You can build on that.
I think it resonates.
Does Poland love you?
Poland hasn't met me yet. Poland was one of the great stalwarts in the Cold War in fighting off the Soviet Union, and so sort of the Cold War aspect of remnants of American conservatism were like that.
What
Poland
about
is a very Catholic country.
The placement of missiles or missiles?
And
remember
Obama,
that business?
Yes.
What is that? What was that?
Obama shut down the missile defense in Poland and Czechoslovakia when he came in order to reset with Russia. They said it was appeasing Russia.
Let me jump ahead. Does this have anything to do with his selection of a vice president? Who are we thinking of?
Well,
what does the New York Times say is his best selection in its news story?
His best selection?
Yeah, for vice president.
T-Paul.
Polenti was what I thought.
Is Polenti Polish?
No, I think he's Eastern European, but I don't think it's...
Principally Polish?
I don't know if it's Balkan or not.
What I'm having difficulty is why Poland? Why Poland? Why Warsaw?
There's a lot of Polish folks.
There are a lot of
Polish Americans.
Tremendous
in
number.
Ohio.
I'm not denigrating Poland. I just want to know. You got France. You got Germany. Did he deliberately not go to Germany?
Why would you go to Germany?
Why wouldn't you?
Well, that's where candidate Obama
It's probably the most powerful of all the financial.
But Obama went there.
Financial center of the world.
Obama went there and got 200,000 people. You want to go there and get 200,000
people at the Brandenburg Gate. He would not have
comparison would be awkward.
You think he regrets it?
He could probably Romney could probably get a couple dozen people in a broad house.
He's making fun of Obama going to the Brandenburg Gate. What did you think of that?
I'm not making fun of it.
He did.
I said Romney would have gotten only 150 people at the Brandenburg Gate.
Exactly. We're making fun of Romney,
How do you know that?
I don't know that, but I know that he's not the character that Obama is.
He doesn't fill up stadiums.
Yes.
He just doesn't do that.
Are we tracing that to Obama's color?
No. Obama was a sensation worldwide when he was nominated.
He went to Cairo after about 6 months, his first stop,
and
right?
It was a famous speech, but there wasn't much follow-up.
Yeah, did it cause the youth of Cairo to rise up and do what they did to that?
It caused expectations to rise that were not realized.
Exit question. What nations did Mr. Romney not visit on this trip, possibly deliberately?
Afghanistan, where there's more troops anywhere than anywhere else in the world right now, I believe.
That's correct. What other?
He visited nowhere because there was no place else that he wanted to go because he just wants to criticize President Obama. He doesn't want to say what he's going to do. So virtually any other country he went to,
Germany is far more powerful.
But Germany, we just
Germany's
made the
doling
point.
out money,
big
money.
We just made the point that Barack Obama candidate went there, and you don't want to invite a comparison. He should have gone to Paris.
Well, Romney speaks French.
He doesn't want people to know.
That's the last thing you want him doing.
Does he not want to deal with the new socialist leader of France?
No, it's Eleanor. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Eleanor Sarkozy.
I think that he
thought. Does he not want to associate with a socialist?
I think he wants safe places with conservative governments to burnish his image as a foreign policy player, and he has
Pro-American.
not been able to achieve that in the
And
same
in
Do
places
you
where
think-
Obama
do you-
has upset the population.
Do you think Obama is trying to say, look, we've had this China infatuation. We've had crossing the Pacific.
you mean-
Let's go back to our
Romney
true friends.
saying that, you're saying?
Romney.
Not,
Romney.
Romney's saying that, not Obama.
Yeah.
Romney's
Yes,
saying
that's
that.
part of it.
Let's go back to our two friends where we have a seasoned friendship.
There is something about Romney's foreign policy that feels very 1982, and I think there is a kind of nostalgia for that day, and that's why he's going to Poland. That's why he's
Do you
focused on
think-
Russia as our #1 enemy, which sort of
Yeah,
no
but
one quite gets.
do you
but,
think-
but him, and I think it appeals to, as you were saying, so
It's a-
some
John,
of
think the
some of the
American
remnant
people-
Cold War warriors
John,
of
it's
the
a-
Do you think the
conservative
American
base.
people have taken the Clinton Secretary of State and the Obama bait about going in a new
Right.
direction? Or do you think they're having second thoughts now?
John-
We are fundamentally isolationists
If
right
you-
now.
if you
We're
read-
living in an
John, it
isolation.
is a
you read-
we are
two words.
isolation.
It is a friends first policy.
Friends first.
Friend. That's what Romney is saying, and these are our friends.
And if you read Romney's book, No Apologies, he takes his shots at old Europe too. He's not. This is not about reversing the trend of foreign policy.
I'm not saying reverse it. Maybe he just wants to make sure that they realize that they are special in our
Well-
relationship with them. We go a long way back, much longer than with China. Issue 2, back to Iraq. 116 Iraqi citizens dead, 300 wounded. Bombings and shootings throughout Iraq this week. It was Iraq's deadliest week in 2 years. Al-Qaeda claimed the ongoing horror on radical Islamist websites. Al-Qaeda declares it has launched a new jihad against Iraq, vowing to retake areas it once controlled, thus pushing Iraq into civil war. The attacks hit mostly Sunni-dominated areas with ethnically and religiously mixed populations. And get this, these attacks have come during the holy month of Ramadan, the Muslim month of fasting, which began last week. Iraq's bloodshed coincides with an intensifying conflict in neighboring Syria. Al-Qaeda militants are passing in and out of Syria over the Syria-Iraq border. Despite the horrific continuing assault on Iraq, Al-Qaeda is regarded by Iraqi officials as significantly weaker than at its peak in 2006 and 2007. Yet the nation is far from being stable. Zbigniew Brzezinski, former National Security Advisor to President Carter, notes how the horror is multiplying itself.
First of all, the daily killings, the struggle between the Shiites and the Sunnis, the increased Iranian influence, the resentments left by 100,000 Iraqi civilians killed. Who is it a model for?
So, what's the answer to Dr. Brzezinski's question? Is Iraq a model for anyone? Tim Carney, and you may have to go a little bit into the history of how we got into Iraq and expended what we're going to see in a minute, what we expended there.
Well, Iraq is different from Afghanistan in one direction, but it's also different from the West in another direction. In other words, Afghanistan, we've had a much harder problem building up a state, building up a civil society at all, because there wasn't sort of anything to build on. Iraq, before we went in and before we did the regime change, there was a regime, there was a society, a civilization, and so we've built something more stable. We haven't been able to keep Al-Qaeda out, obviously, but so then we look at future kind of regime changes, what we do in Libya, what we do in these other countries, and we think, well, if even in Iraq that had such a history of itself being a nation, we've had trouble building something that's peaceful and stable, maybe this whole project of nation building is too risky.
Hold on for 1 minute. Let's look at the U.S. cost in Iraq, the lives and the dollars in U.S. cost. Okay, the U.S. toll in Iraq. Blood, sweat, and many tears in our U.S. 9-year liberation and defense of Iraq, 2003 to 2011. We have lost 4,485 American soldiers. We have spent almost $850 billion. That's over $750 billion on Iraq. So how will history judge the involvement of the United States in Iraq starting in 2003 and still ongoing 2012? Pat Buchanan.
I think it's the worst strategic blunder in American history, John. Look what's happening. Al-Qaeda now is trying to start a civil sectarian war to split the Sunnis in Anbar away from the main country and to get together with the Sunnis in Syria. You could have a Sunni-Shia war from Lebanon and Syria and Iraq. It's a total disaster, and we ignited it.
What do you think?
Right. A huge mistake, but you have to accept.
Did you oppose it at the time?
I opposed it from the beginning. I was part of the 7%.
So did I, and so did he.
Initially. But now we're looking at what's going on in Syria and the fact that the Maliki regime in Iraq is aiding Assad because the Alawites are more closely aligned with the Shiites. You got the Saudis aiding the rebels because there's a Sunni axis. And I think there's great apprehension that what's happening in Syria and the bloodshed in Iraq could spill out into wider sectarian wars, which we have no business being part of.
Well, what you have is an ongoing civil war in both Iraq and Syria, slow burning, with Al-Qaeda at the margins, not actually being a huge force, but willing to use horrendous violence to stir up trouble and make a place for itself.
Do you recall a famous journalist who once said, if you really want to get your ratings up as the politicians, you've got to have a war? You remember that?
I'm not sure who that was. I don't.
I'm trying to think of who read it. Do you remember who said that?
I think it was you, John.
No, but what about that? You think that's part of
there's no doubt about it, yeah.
You're going to get a war?
It was Hemingway.
No, it was not Hemingway.
Well, Hemingway talked about war and inflation are the two solutions they always turn to.
In the short run, I think right now there's a good politics in ending wars.
Issue 3, exposed, dismissed, and punished.
This conduct is contemptible. It betrays our national interest. It compromises our men and women in the field. And it demands a full and prompt investigation by a special counsel. What kind of White House would reveal classified material for political gain?
Republican presidential candidate Mitt Romney, in a keynote address this week to the veterans of foreign wars, squarely accused the White House of leaking national security data to the media, notably leaks that included data about the U.S.'s involvement in cyber attacks on Iran and President Obama's quote-unquote kill list of terrorists abroad, and details on how the raid on Osama bin Laden's compound was executed. He invoked the chairwoman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, Democratic Senator Dianne Feinstein, who had just said this to the World Affairs Council.
I think the White House has to understand that some of this is coming from its ranks.
Senator Feinstein, a day later, tried to walk back her remarks. Quote, I was asked whether the White House might be responsible for recent national security leaks. I stated that I did not believe the president leaked classified information. I shouldn't have speculated beyond that because the fact of the matter is I don't know the source of the leaks, unquote. Mr. Romney says it's time to know.
Whoever provided classified information to the media seeking political advantage for the administration must be exposed, dismissed, and punished. The time for stonewalling is over.
Question, is Romney exaggerating the danger to U.S. national security caused by these leaks? Hello.
Yes, he's really on thin ice here with these overheated charges. He's essentially saying the president betrayed the country. That's an awfully tough charge to make. There are a lot of people in the Oval Office apparently or in the Situation Room when the president is selecting these targets. I think we knew Lyndon Johnson when he did much the same thing during the Vietnam era. I don't know that getting this out damages national security. And then Mitt Romney is in London bragging about how he just met with the British intelligence agency, which wasn't on anybody's public schedule, and it is not something you disclose. So, woohoo, he just disclosed classified material. This is a fight that goes on in Washington a long time, and occasionally it's serious, but this time it's not.
She mentions Lyndon Johnson in this regard, but Lyndon Johnson was very unorthodox. He had a hound dog, and he would lift the dog up bodily by the ears of the dog. Now, what kind of a person does that? I ask you. You have something to say on this?
Yes, I do.
Go ahead.
For me, the irony is that Obama has persecuted and prosecuted leakers in his own administration more than any president. In fact, he's used the Espionage Act against domestic leakers more than all the other presidents combined. He repeatedly goes after guys who leak things that he doesn't find to be helpful. Meanwhile, he's leaking these things that are in his own political interest.
Look, Dianne Feinstein said, my heart stopped when I read about the Stuxnet leaks. They put this malware into the centrifuges at Natanz. It caused 1,000...
In Iran.
In Iran. It caused 1,000 of them to self-destruct. It damaged their program. They leaked out how it got in there, how it got out of there. This is a national security...
It was leaked by the White House.
It is a vital weapon. Let me tell you something else.
Barack Obama... that's the charge.
No,
Barack Obama, John, hold it on. Barack Obama or Donlin, they know who leaked this stuff. This is right out of the Situation Room, the kill list.
Did Obama authorize the leaking out of the White House?
If he didn't, why doesn't he call in Donlin and say, did you do it? And if you didn't, run down in the NSA.
Who's Donlin?
He's the NSC advisor.
Predictions, Pat.
Assad of Syria has given autonomy to his Kurdish provinces out there. If he stays with that, the Turks will intervene in Syria.
Eleanor.
Richard Carmona, formerly George W. Bush's Surgeon General, now running as a Democrat for the U.S. Senate in Arizona, will be a featured speaker at the Democratic Convention, possibly the keynoter.
Tim.
Ted Cruz is going to win the runoff in Texas over David Dewhurst to be the next senator, and in the Senate he will be one of the 5 most conservatives, along with Jeff Flake of Arizona, Jim DeMint, Mike Lee, and Rand Paul.
They're not all elected.
Everyone will think the upcoming debates in October between the presidential candidates will be absolutely decisive because the race is so short or so tight, but it will have no effect on the outcome.
U.S. economic stagnation, even with new stimulus, will continue through August, September, and October, freezing the 44th U.S. president to 1 term. Blessed Ramadan. Bye-bye.
In today's global economy, finding smart investments requires expertise from the ground up, seeing first what others see eventually. At Franklin Templeton, we have experts across the globe with local insight to spot distant opportunities and navigate world markets. Our approach has given us a unique perspective on global investing for over 60 years. Franklin Templeton Investments. Gain from our perspective.